Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you once again for tuning in, and I hope you're doing good. In this video, I want to go over something with the interchangeable lens cameras, either mirrorless or DSLR, especially for those of you who are starting to get into content creation, video content creation with these cameras, and you're looking to step up your game over using a smartphone. Now, there are a few guidelines I'd like to just offer in general when you're going into doing video shooting, video content creation with an interchangeable lens camera. Let's start with perhaps the most basic, probably the most important thing, is whether to shoot manual or automatic. In general, it's good to shoot manual because you have the greatest creative control over your picture, over the image that you're trying to capture. So definitely want to go manual. Next, shutter speed. The general rule of thumb is that your shutter speed should be twice the frame rate of the video that you're recording. Now, typically when you're shooting video, you're going to be shooting at 24 frames or 30 frames per second. So at 24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1/48, or more commonly, you're going to use the setting of 1/50 for your camera. 30 frames would be 1/60. You don't want to go above that. If you go far above that, especially, you will find problems with motion, sort of weird artifacts and aliasing artifacts. It's not a good thing. You want to keep that frame rate low for sure. Next, aperture. This depends on your lens. In general, if you want to get that nice depth of field that you can capture with an interchangeable lens camera, I recommend try opening out to 2.8. If you have a kit lens, that may not be possible because the kit lenses, the aperture depends on where you are in your zooming. It's typically going to be 3.5, 4.5-ish. What you want to do, if possible, is just set the camera so it's open up as wide as possible. Now, ISO. ISO is the sensitivity in your camera. Generally, you want this to be as low as possible because of the possibility that if you have it set too high, you can capture some grain in the background, and then it sometimes doesn't look very good. So as low as possible. White balance. In general, most people use automatic white balance or auto white balance. That's usually fine, but when you get to people that actually do this for a living or are actually pretty serious about it, they follow a good practice of actually setting or calibrating the white balance. Now, getting into the particulars of setting up white balance is, I think, beyond the scope of this generalized video. That's something that I can get into in another video, or you can go on YouTube. There are lots of great tutorial videos on how to set white balance for your camera. Focusing mode. Now, for focus, if you're doing a selfie type video where where it's just you and nobody's behind the camera and the camera is basically pointing at you, and you have that back flippy screen is facing you to do your own kind of selfie video, autofocus is usually good. If you're doing the normal type of shooting, where you or somebody else is behind the lens, autofocusing might be okay, but you're going to need to practice and be familiar with how the autofocusing works so you know how to take control and make sure that your subject matter for your video is always properly in focus. One thing you want to keep in mind is that professionals generally, when they work behind the camera for cinematography or videography, they're always going to be engaging manual focus because you get the best, and for them, the proper creative control that they need. So I think it's good practice to start to get familiar with focusing manually and using some of the tools and the aids and the features in the camera to help you along. Actually, I should be doing manual focus. It's something that I should be doing more, but unfortunately I admit that I shoot auto more than I probably should. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is that when you have all these settings dialed in and everything seems good to you and proper, you might find that in an outdoor setting, especially when there's lots of daylight out there may be too much light coming into your camera. If that happens, you're going to need something called a circular polarizer, which is this little thing here. This acts as basically like a sunglasses for your camera, which basically works to filter out some of the light so then you could have better control of how much light is actually entering into your camera. This tends to really happen in video type settings because of the shutter speed being low and your aperture being wide. Those two conditions can cause a lot of light to come in. It's different from, like, say if you're shooting still photography and you could crank up the shutter speed and such to control the amount of light coming in. With video, you don't really quite have that kind of control with shutter speed. It needs to be down there at 1/50 or 1/60. So that's a basic overview of the particulars of the settings, to be aware of when you're shooting video in an interchangeable lens, whether it's mirrorless or DSLR. I hope this is maybe a good start. There's lots of great tutorials out there on the web and on YouTube. And wish you the best of luck. Go out there, create content that makes you happy, makes you good about communicating your message, and just have fun with it. All right, take care. Talk to you soon.